Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Black Block. Just kidding. uh, or not. But yes, this is the season 11 Gap Riot Press launch. And part of these activities, we're meeting with the gorgeous Dennis Unrau, and Victoria Spence Naik. I said that right? And perfect. And so, yeah, they're going to jam out and talk to each other about their books, which we love. So sit back, relax, enjoy the tea, and yeah, off to you, Mel. Tell us a little bit about your work.
Great. Hi, I'm Mel. I'm here to talk about this beautiful chapbook. Hope is coming through my list, which I'm so honored to be publishing with Gap Riot Press, and so grateful to have worked with Danny and Kate on this project. So the chapbook is, I guess, kind of a follow-up to my book Goose that came out in the fall, and I can flash that one too.
Oh, yeah, I don't have mine around, but I have it somewhere.
So lovely. Thank you. And yeah, so I'm working with the works of SCLs, who like to be called the father of the tar sands, who wrote some sort of literary works and illustrated them himself, but I did a lot of archival research as part of that project. And one of the things I found in the archives was a grocery list that was crossed out, and he had turned over the page and written something more important on the other side. And in a quirk of archival research, I don't remember what was on the other side and didn't take a photo. But I was so excited to find this glimpse of domestic life from someone who was quite, I think, quite private about his domestic and family life, and maybe not very interested in it. Also, he was very outward focused in terms of his reputation as a founder of the notorious Athabasca tar sands industry. So just finding this little bit of domestic life in the archive was so cool, and I decided to make poems out of this list that I think is written in both Sid's hand and his wife Irene's hand. So the poems are anagrams made out of the letters in their list that I hand traced, sort of using the constraint of only using each letter one time. And the poems inside the book are written from Irene's perspective and from Sid's perspective, but of course it's all just imagined. So that's my list.
It's really, I've had a chance to look at it, Mel, and it's just an incredible, beautiful piece of work in terms of what you put together. And I love hearing about some of the details of what you've pulled out. I didn't realize you had that constraint around the letters, which makes it even more, to find the magic of those small pieces and put them together in that way is incredible. So I guess I'll introduce mine as well. So there's mine. I don't have it here with me yet. So my chapbook with Gap Riot Press, and thank you to Kate and Danny for all of your work to bring it to life. You can see that gorgeous reflective cover has been an editorial vision that has been beautiful to see. It is a work that is, centered in this idea or this action of get ready with me, something that I find really fascinating, a quirk of human behavior related to how we engage with technology that takes something that's very essentially private and kind of an everyday activity and turns it into a performance, turns it into an invitation, makes a moment that's generally kind of very private and regular, turns it into a bit of a conversation or almost confession sometimes. And that was my starting point for the writing, is to think about that, what a get ready would look like, a get ready with me from the perspective of a poet. And so that's really where the work started, and it incorporates both images that you would see if you were in that get ready with me context, mediated through technology, including, the kind of grotesque angles that we sometimes see when we pick up a phone and turn on the camera, as well as the monologue that you might hear of someone as they're going through and getting ready. And in this case, it's a poet who's confronting what it means to get ready for aging, get ready for the creative process and what that means. And so that was the inspiration behind the work, and where the images and the text start and kind of started to be put together. And I was so excited to see it, come out and come together in that way, and then have the elements of that reflective cover and the work kind of elevate that idea in a number of ways that even I hadn't anticipated when I wrote it.
Victoria, it's so gorgeous, and we were just oohing and awing over the cover because I had read a PDF and didn't realize that it would have that reflective cover, which just adds so much to this piece that already I think is so stunning, and especially some of the imagery just has stuck with me over the past several days as I've been thinking about it. The eyes looking down at the camera while putting on mascara in particular, what those eyes know and are saying, and what kinds of things you talk about when you're looking at maybe your friend from that perspective. And I find the whole thing so fascinating. Thank you for doing this with me. I'm really honored to be paired with you in this series. So I get to ask the first question, and my question is about the relationship between text and image in your chapbook. And I note this playfulness about what a poem is in the book. So in one poem, you describe a poem as a topographic expression, a peony that's bursting, a vivid plum. And I'm wondering how you think about that relationship between text and image. Like, is it a poem and an image, or together are they a poem? Does one illustrate the other, or augment the other, or how do you think about that relationship?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I think in the works that I've written, it can come together in so many different ways. In this case, it really began with the visual and the image, the idea of someone looking into the camera and having that image reflected back to them as the starting point. A lot of my work includes visual elements, everything from fully drawn images to even the smallest kind of images and icons that we have and we use every day. I find it fascinating how quickly a very simple circle or line can draw meaning when it's put in juxtaposition with something else. Yes. So for example, in this work, you see the @ sign, which can be such a mundane symbol. And if you put it in a circle, it suddenly becomes a breast and a nipple. And so a lot of my play with images looks for those moments of creating uncanny or grotesque or unusual contradictions by placing those pieces together. And so this work certainly draws on that a lot. I think of image and text, and most of my work draws on both as amplifiers of each other. And as soon as you take two things and put them next to each other, even just two letters, but certainly two symbols, really two marks on a page, they begin to make meaning together that didn't exist when they weren't next to each other. And so that's really, the foundation of how I think about this work. And, when I think of your work and this act of taking letters and retracing them and finding within that action of tracing a new meaning and a new kind of puzzling together of what meaning might exist within a document. And so you have this beautiful set piece that you found, and recognizing within it, the possibility of all of these other meanings radiating out of this domestic space. I'd love to hear more about, why you chose tracing, to keep those letters in the shape as they were written, gives it this tactile, very graphic presentation in your work. And so I'd love to hear more about why or what made you, you know, choose tracing to represent and to draw out other meanings from the language that was in the list.
Oh, great. Thanks. Thanks for the great question. I'm going to show you the list. First of all, this is my traced version of the list. And then I'll pick one of Irene's poems. So it says, I'm reading backwards here. Oh, yes, oh, the nest flown, oh, liar. And I guess the decision to trace is connected to the decision to trace all the poems in the book Goose. So I already sort of had landed on that method for engaging with this broader archive of Elsa's works. And then I had these poems that I was sort of playing around with. I actually workshopped them with Kate and Danny at a Banff Center writing residency, where I think it might have been Danny who said, why don't you try working with the letters? So it seemed very unruly to try to line them up, and it was. I've been thinking about making a video to sort of show how I do it, and it's like kind of a sloppy technique in a way that I had to use to make two people's handwriting kind of flow together. But I guess I kind of figured it out well enough to make this thing. And I think in terms of the meaning and like what I was trying to say or build with it, it comes from my own assumptions about what these two people were like and what their relationship must have been like. And I could be totally wrong about those assumptions, of course. And it also, I think, comes from like my practice as a literary scholar of like being curious and taking some creative leaps with things. I also think, I don't know, it comes from my upbringing among fundamentalists, questioning everything around me and reading into everything in very odd ways. Like I know this is a strange thing that I did, and I guess it's been fun. But similarly, I think I'll jump to asking about your method and how you make your drawings as a non-visual artist. Most of the time I'm very curious about, like, I keep holding, this is one of my tracing pens, like what do you draw with? How do you do the layering that I see you doing of the sort of digital and then the hand-drawn? So yeah, I'd love to just hear about your process.
Sure. I think as a starting point, one thing I'll share is I have been someone who's engaged in life drawing for my entire life. And so going to live drawing sessions, drawing models from real life, and it's become a part of my practice almost as a warm-up activity. I do it almost every time I sit down, whether I'm going to write something or draw something, to just quickly and kind of automatically produce line drawings. And it's really the foundation of a lot of my work. And so these drawings come out of that technique. I generally draw with black pen on paper. I've experimented with starting with digital drawing first, and it just never worked for me in the same way. I always start with the tactile and the physical of the page. And I love pen and ink in a way because it's very unforgiving and it requires you to just commit. You can't, once you make a mistake, that's just, that's how something looks. And a lot of my drawings have strange distortions because I can't erase. And I think that's drawn me even more towards distortion. And in the book, you see a lot of images where, where the idea of topography comes from is just the way you represent shadow becomes very black or white, high contrast. And the way you see the distortions of the body is just expressed through that very immediate drawing. And if you get it wrong, that's just how it looks. And so I love kind of, going forward with that and just accepting that there's some truth into how that's represented as it comes that way. In this case, with the poetry book, because I wanted to, the concept of get ready with me, I always wanted to write about it, but I knew that there was be a visual component, and I started with those images, and then I looked at them as I had drawn them and started to pull from them. What is this image telling me about this from the perspective of a poet? It starts with me posing with makeup brushes and a very little representation of a get ready with me video. But once I look at it as a poet, something, as a drawing, what does that really mean from the lens of the creative process of writing a poem? And so that's where the writing came from. And it has been intentionally designed so that the images and the poems complement each other on the page and intersect in that way, which isn't always the case with how I work, but certainly in this one, it felt right to have them be to sit together and interact with each other. I was actually curious with your process. One question I had was, within all of these beautiful tracing, you also have just the trace lines and the inclusion of that moment in the book. And I was curious about what drew you to pulling those lines in, because to me, I think because I love the pen and ink drawing, I was really drawn to those pages where it was not necessarily the letters, but something much simpler that you were pulling into the work. Can you share a little bit about what was pulled into the work when you drew those lines or incorporated them in?
Yeah, so there are these, well, I have the little bookmark that Kate and Danny made. Maybe I can show the lines, which were the lines I think that Sid drew to like cross out the grocery list and then flip it over. But they kind of came to represent to me like two different sides of the story or the list, because I use it in one direction before Irene's poems and then in the other direction before Sid's. I also, in addition to just seeing it as two different perspectives, I started to feel from the way that I had to move my hands to trace the different letters that I think Irene was left-handed and Sid was right-handed. So I think of those directions in relation to like their different orientations to the page. And then also I'll just add that another thing that I started doing as I was tracing was I started including like their little underlines.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody had, like they dotted their I really far away from the I, and it felt like a moment when I realized what that dot was and what it belonged with. So then I started associating certain other pen strokes with certain letters so that when I traced them, I would also add in that little bit. And so it just became part of the like bigger story that the list tells and that I could put into my poems too. Yeah.
I felt I noticed when reading it, the O's especially, that they represented something, they're larger, they take up a unique space, they give a unique energy to the words you pull them into. And so it's so fascinating to see how the repetition of those certain letters, their size and the space they create on the page has this formal impact when you look at it all together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and my pen strokes are, so inexpert compared to yours, but I do love sort of the connection between these two pieces in terms of that hand-drawn quality that they have and that beautiful evocation of like the topography and the line. that I see in your work. So that's really cool. Yeah.
I had one more question just before, like, just, thinking about the theme of Danny and I's call. So we really wanted to jolt ourselves out of the kind of, like the usual stuff that we sometimes get, which is fine. We love it all, but we wanted to really be energized in this work. And so we've started this series called Fuck It Up. And the first iteration is this season, which is Fuck with the Future. So how would you both kind of describe how your work fucks with the future?
And maybe I'll jump in and give you a second to think, because we sprung that on you. Because what we loved about getting these submissions is that they had such a keen eye on the past as they were looking through and envisioning different futures and thinking about like really contemporary media formats, the Get Ready With Me format. And Mel, I can't, as you're talking about it, I really think this work is some like scholarly fanfic that I love in such a wonderful way. So yeah, how is this fucking with the future, looking backwards and looking forwards thing happening? We're so curious.
Do you
I'm
want
happy
to go?
to jump in first, Mel. I think for my, when I saw your call, as I was starting to pull together these ideas, and to me, a lot of my work, both this and other work that I work on, I am a little bit obsessed with our human interaction with technology, not coming from someone who's as a technophobe or technophilia. I just find that technology creates all of these moments of unveiling human behavior to us in very fascinating ways. And so when I think of using, a very contemporary social media form of Get Ready With Me, to me, it's so fascinating to think about, why did that become a thing that we suddenly decided to do? We have these devices that, within our own generation have become something that went from something that seemed impossible to something we use every day. And it brought out in us a desire to, narrate what was going on in our lives while we're going through these very routine. It creates these very strange moments. And I think they become so pervasive that they stop feeling strange. But if you pause to think about them, it brings out these elements of who we are as humans. And so I continue to chase the idea of technology as it goes into the future and what it means for us, not, celebrating it and not running away from it either, but just looking at it as this strange contorting mirror that is constantly showing us ourselves. I think the central thesis of a lot of my work is technology is human. It just reflects back to us what we are. And when we have strong negative reactions against it, it's strong negative reactions against humanity. And when we love it and it does amazing things for us, we're recognizing our own ingenuity as humans. So I write a lot about that. And I think in that way, I'm always looking for the human in what's happening in those spaces. Not in a science fiction way, but in a way that's very intimate and personal, and just that moment of, when you see your own reflection at a distorted angle and you have a reaction. To me, that is an incredibly fascinating human moment. I feel like I could write about that my whole life. So that's how I continue to explore and fuck with the future, is really to look at all of this technology that's mediating our lives and look at what is it telling us about ourselves, things we want to hear, things we don't want to hear, and what we have a reaction to.
Yeah, and just as you were saying that, Victoria, like what I was thinking too, that I think really brings both of your works together is this kind of refusal of a cohesive or singular narrative of who someone is, or their legacy, right? So like, for you, it's this kind of like Get Ready With Me as this aging poet, this you're saying it's intermediate with technology. There's many ways of even thinking about aging, but even yourself into the future. There's a refusal to have that be linear and have it be clean and have it even be, I don't know, like in our world where everything is so curated to be kind of perfect, like you're kind of undoing and I think refusing that narrative of curation, which I think is really interesting. And then like Mel, obviously Sid was really, dare I even say, protective of his like legacy as like this father of the tar sands. I actually think by kind of digging and literally flipping over the archive and uncovering this like domestic document, it kind of undoes that kind of singular narrative of who Sid was, right? Because then you kind of were like, well, what about Irene? And what about this? And what about this? What was his life actually like outside of this kind of perfectly tied up narrative as this like kind of father of all things awful? um, but anyway, so like there's like that kind of like, again, refusal of futurity being this kind of singular telos of where we're headed, and kind of like a kind of undoing maybe of that kind of narrative a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess like the bigger project of what I've been doing with Sid Els and his work across a few different things, to me has to do with like reckoning with the history of extractivism in Canada, of this industry, in particular of the like colonial, racist, and sexist ideologies that it's built on, as well as, our settler colonial nation being built on. Sort of that it's important to face those things and not assume that we can move on from them without reckoning with them. I think this is really familiar, although we're still, we're hearing today how important Canadian oil might be in this crisis at the moment. And I'm so hopeful that we're moving away from continuing to extract some of the dirtiest oil in the world, but I'm also not hopeful at this moment. So it's interesting to look into the archive and to see, or to suggest that Irene and Els were already reckoning with those things. Like it's not only that we look back and engage with these things, but that they were, there were people living and grappling with those dynamics in their day-to-day lives in whatever incomplete ways Irene and Sid may have been grappling with them. And so I guess it's like the past and the future, and my own present gets tangled in with it. My own care work and domestic work and anxiety about the past and the future and all of that also comes to play, of course, when I start playing around with their words and their letters. So, yeah.
Lovely. Mm-hmm.
Thank you both so much for taking this time to talk with us and sharing your work with us and letting us be a little part of bringing it out in the world. We are very grateful to you, and we're quite honored.
Likewise.
Thank you. I mean, it's been so wonderful to work with both of you, and Mel, to meet you through this process. And it's exciting to see that the works come to life. I special place in my heart for the chapbooks and the small works and the hand binding and all of that. So thank you for all of that creative love that you're putting into it.
My God, the pleasure is totally ours. It was, we love sewing books, and that's what we wanted. We wanted, I think, we got exactly what we wanted out of this season, which is just to be kind of, again, like I said, just jolted awake. And I think at this time in particular, what I wrote in that LinkedIn post is true. Like, I think, for me personally, like, I think there's just something about, sewing a book and just mailing a book to someone to discover, like, And I've benefited from that. Like there's been people who have sent me work out of the blue, and like maybe I'm having a bad day, or maybe I'm just like feeling shitty about the world. And then I'll remember, oh yeah, there's someone making this beautiful thing and there's a community around it.
Yeah.
And I'll read it and it'll just totally change my perspective, you know? And I think that's really powerful and something worth preserving. And so, you know, that's why Danny and I wanted to really reduce the amount of, you know, like books we were preserving and really put the thought and the care. And I think in both of these works, when people hold them, they will feel that kind of love and care and community. And that is really, really special, I think, about small press. And so I could talk about that all day long, but it's for me, like this is life-giving work. And I really love that. So thanks for trusting us and being a part of it. It's been great.